Hello, everyone, our viewers at Gadisa Rabadori program. Today we have a special guest for you, Dr. Frank Ashall. Dr. Frank served as Associate Professor at School of Medicine at Addis Ababa University for the last four years. He's an established academic who authored many scientific papers on peer-reviewed journals. He was educated at Oxford University, where he obtained his doctorate in biochemistry. He also obtained his medical degree from St. Louis University School of Medicine in the United States of America. He's a campaigner for tobacco control, and he has recently been appointed as the Director General for Africa Tobacco Free Initiative, a Kenyan-based NGO that's working for to tackle problems of tobacco in Africa. He is also a human rights activist. Today, we will discuss with him about his time and experience in Ethiopia. And also we will talk about Dr. Tedros Adhanom nomination for WHO Director General position and his thoughts. Welcome to the show, Dr. Frank.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much, and we are glad to have you here. And let's start with the reflection of your experience in Ethiopia. You have been there for 4 years, in fact, teaching in one of the best universities that the country had, Addis Ababa University, medical school that has been running for nearly 5 decades now. So I want to have your reflection about your experience there, the students, the medical education system generally, and how you happen to go there. And I understand that you were pushed out by the government. So I would like to have your reflection on these points.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure I was pushed out by the government, but I really can't explain what happened, really. That was one possibility in my interpretation, but I'm kind of baffled because I had a year left of my contract there, and I was actually voted the #1 teacher by the medical students. They were very nice medical students. They organized a prize-giving ceremony for me, and they didn't even tell me. They just invited me, and I turned up, and they gave me the prize. Anyway, so I was very popular with the students and considered, to be a professor who stimulated them and inspired them. So I don't really know what happened, but I can tell you sort of generally. But anyway, the university was a very nice place to work in. I enjoyed it as a foreigner. I loved teaching there, and I love Ethiopia. I really do. It's really close to my heart. Really, in the end, aside from any negatives, it really was probably the best experience of my life as someone who's never been to an African country. But I enjoyed teaching, and I loved the students. They were and most of the students I found were enthusiastic, and they were keen to learn, and very communicative. And I had conversations with many students. It went from medical conversations, biochemistry conversations, to socio-political conversations. I wanted to learn everything, but I never really. I certainly didn't get involved in any activism at all. I always told the students, get on with your work, get your medical degree or get your MSc and do something with it. That was my message.
How was it that, in Tukurambisa, or this in medical school, is where some of the top students, the creme of the crop, as they call it, you have those kind of students generally being enrolled in that university, in that campus specifically. How was it that, especially you have a vast experience in other parts of the world as well, but I just want you to reflect on especially the capability of the students, their conducts and everything, yeah.
Well, the students, there's a very wide range of abilities, and also even of preparedness for going to medical school or being an I taught medical MSc students as well, biochemistry students, and there was a very wide range of ability. But generally speaking, I think they were good students, and they certainly had potential with good teaching and what have you. They would do very well. A lot of enthusiasm. I found I really enjoyed the students. I would say that. I can't speak for most professors, but I did see it's maybe a little different in the culture, the system of universities there. I felt students were often treated not very respectfully sometimes by their professors. That really kind of surprised me, but I felt that was a cultural thing. For example, there's a tendency for some professors there to really destructively criticize students, negatively criticize them, and make them feel bad. I have some interesting experiences where students would text me and say they feel terrible because they were just criticized so much when they give a seminar. I'm not used to that. I'm used to encouraging students, and if they do something wrong or not very well, to show them how to do it better without making them feel bad.
Yeah, thank you. There is this policy that we will talk about it, if you like, in the latter part of our show. But part of Dr. Tewodros' policy in the Ethiopian medical education system was what they call this flooding. The health personnel. Training many doctors, many nurses, many pharmacists, everything like that. So when, as compared to the 1970s or 80s, the medical school accepts actually something like 300%, 400% of its actual capability.
Yes.
How do you evaluate this, especially as its impact on the quality of education that professors like you had to experience and had to face on the real ground?
Yeah, well, as you know, Ethiopia has a very high patient-to-doctor ratio, 30,000 people for every doctor, I think it is. It's about 450 in the UK and 450 or something in the US, people per doctor, 30,000 in Ethiopia. And yes, more doctors are needed. But I do think it's a little bit excessive to increase the numbers so rapidly, so quickly, so many, because you don't want to sacrifice quality for numbers. Like I said, there was a very wide range of abilities, and some of the poorer medical students. I think you're going to take more poorer medical students. Obviously, if you take more medical students generally, you're going to take more poorer ones, and they've got to take care of the people, the health of the people, and with rapidly increasing high numbers, I'm not sure that it keeps up with the quality of teaching.
This tension.
I think Dr. Tedros' argument is that it doesn't matter; you just get as many as you can, and also some of them will leave the country too. And you'll end up having at least some doctors, you'll have more doctors per patient, but I'm not sure that to the extent that it is, in my opinion, this is that it's necessary to go so high in the numbers, and when you can't keep up with the education.
This idea, the tension between quantity and quality is very apparent in the country's health and medical education system, because they want to have more quantity, more trained people at a facility that was actually built decades ago to train very few people. So without adding any extra facility to those training facilities like the medical school at Kurambasa, they want to pump students and then train and in fact give them the degree to go to the rural area, and their idea is in fact they have to go and learn after they came out of the medical school. As you said, Ethiopia has, according to me, you said it's one doctor for 33,000, but the latest data I have is one for 39,000. According to the plan by Dr. Adhanom, they want to bring it to one doctor for 10,000.
Yeah.
So
and even that's, a lot of patients per doctor when you compare, like Britain, where we have, as I said, 1 in 450 students. But the other issue is that I think, one thing I was quite concerned about myself. I initially, by the way, I went there as a volunteer for a year, and I taught there as a volunteer professor. Then I became an expatriate associate professor. But one thing that sort of bothered me a little bit was the number of students who want to leave. They want to go out of the country. They don't get paid that much. I think that should be a big issue, more than even numbers, is to get the students, once they become physicians, to get them well paid. I think they earn about 4,000 birr for several years, I believe. I'm not exactly sure about the salaries, but, a lot of them, I was always sort of in a dilemma, because a lot of students, not just medical students, but also MSc students, were asking me how I could I help them get out of the country and work in another country. And I'm like, I actually wanted to be there. I said, am I the only person who wants to be here? Because it seemed like everybody wanted to leave except for me. And as a sort of a little bit of a tangent here, but even when I would go into, for example, the bank, the cashiers would say, where are you from? Oh, I'm from the UK. Oh, you can't help me get out of the country, can you? I'm like, does anybody want to stay here? Is it just me? It was a bit of a joke, but it was some sort of concern for me. And then even more of a concern is that many of the best students want to leave, and they have a better chance of leaving. So, for example, MSc students, some of the best ones we had left the country, and some of them don't want to come back. But you're left with, when that happens, you have this big brain drain. You're left with the poorer quality students. It's not just losing X% of medical students or MSc students. It's losing, if you include quality, you're losing the best of them. And that kind of bothered me, because I went there as a volunteer. I loved the teaching, and I wanted to inspire students. And one of the things I wanted them to do is to go out into the community and be good doctors, and be good scientists and make a difference in their own country. I used to say to them, the US and Britain doesn't need more doctors. They already have 450 patients per doctor. Ethiopia has 30,000. They need doctors. But unfortunately, many of I got so many people asking me. I made a policy in the end that I really didn't want to help them as much as they wanted me to help them leave, because I wanted them to stay there, and but you're losing the better quality students for sure.
That's an unfortunate truth that you made a point here. Even according to a study by the government itself, it's an old study, but in 2009 or 8, that they say nearly half of the country's population, those living in the urban area, they want to leave the country if opportunities available.
Yes.
Even using such a very dangerous opportunities, like making through the jungle or through illegal ways through Libya and Sudan, all these things. So that's the kind of unfortunate condition that Ethiopia is in. But in a way, it contradicts with the narrative that the government has. Yeah. The government says everybody is okay, that the country is growing.
Even aside from my teaching, I met a lot of people. I went into some of the countryside towns. Even I did some projects with my students. I did one in Oromia and one in SNMPR, and I actually lived with the students' families. It was a great experience, but it opened my eyes a lot. But but I talked to a lot of people outside of the outside of the medical school and university. And I can't, especially when the state of emergency came on, many people were saying to me, even crying, I don't want to be in my country anymore. It's terrible. It's like, I'm like, yeah, I know it is. And I experienced it myself. The internet cut was terrible. I couldn't do my work because of it, And even when I was getting into internet cafes, because they cut off the 3G. And when I went into internet cafes, there were power cuts. And, it wasn't just inaccessibility of the internet. It was also power cuts in internet cafes cut you off as well, and you can't do any work. That's a serious problem when you don't have good access to the internet. And I got very upset about that. Lecturers, and goodness knows how many businesses and individuals are suffering from, and what the cost of that is. I think that's short-sighted, really, myself, to cut the internet access off. And even at a basic level, most Ethiopians don't get the internet, and so they don't have access to knowledge and information.
That's a sad truth. Now, I just want you to comment on this. On one hand, the government, has projected the image of Ethiopia to the international community with this theme that they call Ethiopia Rising. On the other hand, you have this dissatisfaction at the ground level you expressed now. So there appears to be a complete detachment between the image of Ethiopia among this Western world and, in fact, the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
Can you comment on this before we actually move on to the next point?
It's absolutely correct, and it took me several years to realize that, actually, because I didn't pay too much attention to the politics I was teaching. I didn't get much information during the first few years, but I began to realize that, what the rest of the world perceives. Traditionally people say, well, Ethiopia has a reputation of being full of starving people, right? Which isn't quite true. You see a lot of people who are not starving in Ethiopia, but there is a problem with famine and drought now. But more than that is that, as you say, it appears that everything is rosy and there's a double-digit economy and all that stuff. But I know the double-digit economy even is just words that really are probably not true, because if you look at the statistics, they're not double-digit really. But the Central Statistical Agency has created these numbers, which many organizations disagree with. But that sounds pretty fancy, double-digit economy. But I saw some very fancy areas in Addis. There's some beautiful areas there, but they're not for most people. And when you look at some of these 5-star hotels and, big shopping malls, which only, people with a lot of money can spend in those shops. You look beneath them, there's a lot of poor people, a lot of families and children. And to be honest, I don't think anybody knows how many there are. But, I know there's some people are saying there's 100,000 or more street children. And goodness knows how many more other people living on the street, and families as well. And my perception was that there were more after 4 years than there were before the 4 years. Whether that was because more people were coming in from the countryside, or whether there was actually an increase in the poverty there, I don't know. But to me, I noticed over 4 years there seemed to be more people on the streets. And you look underneath these fancy buildings, which they use in their, publicity. You see pictures of Addis, but if you look at Addis from a high rise, from my office, for example, or anywhere else, you see a lot of poor areas hidden by the trees and the skyscrapers. And even when you have them disappearing, I believe, from what I heard and from talking to people, that they're knocking, like in Kazanchis, for example, they're knocking the poor people's stores and they build houses down and replace, and maybe they're getting a little bit of compensation, but I'm not sure it's actually good for them. But you're being replaced with these expensive places that most Ethiopians can't even have a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I just brought this point because on one hand, Dr. Tedros is playing this kind of image that has been created and cooked, I would say. In fact, as your point also goes to that line. So he is playing on this kind of image that they brought the country out of poverty. And they have.
I would say to you that I'm a little baffled by it. I have some explanations, perhaps possible ones, as to why the outside of Ethiopia it looks rosy from the outside, but it doesn't from the inside. As far as I'm concerned, and to be honest, I was sad. I was very sad to see to find out what I found out. You've got to look at the people as well, and when I believe they're significantly oppressed. When I talk to people about that, everybody agrees. They daren't even say the word government. They were afraid. I used to be sort of play almost tricks on people. I'd talk about the policies and the government and the oppression there. And people would say, oh, don't talk about that, please. Even in my own apartment, they think there are spies living next door. And, that's not a nice, coming from a democracy where, I can talk about my prime minister as badly as I wish. I can speak it loud, but you can't do that there. You can't criticize, the government or the prime minister or anybody, and that's not democracy, is it? But it affects people, and in fact, it affects people badly. Some of them, they feel helpless. They can't leave the country. They can't even afford the airfare. Even some of the professors at the university. One professor actually confided in me once, but he only confided in me in a car park. We were walking through a car park, and he said. He started talking about how he feels so repressed, and he can't speak about, out against the government there because he's too afraid. But he could do it in the car park. But even then, he was looking around his shoulder. That's not a nice atmosphere to live in, and people are helpless. But I did that. Some people would when I mentioned this, some people were actually, even some students. I got some harassment from several students saying, don't criticize don't criticize my country. But the majority of people agreed with me. But some of them would do that. They would harass me even because saying, you're a spy for your government, which is ridiculous. Why would I be a spy for my own government? And things like that. And obviously, these people like what's going on, but the majority of people don't.
That's a sad reality again, as I already said. But it did. The important thing that I would like to make before we move on to the next agenda is that this is not. This has been the image of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Ethiopia's image as displayed to the world has always been different to the ground reality.
Yes.
It has always been different in history and now.
But I would say, as a foreigner, you have to live here to see that. It took me several years to figure it out, and whatever people say, I've lived there for 4 years, and I did integrate quite significantly and talked to tons of people, visited many places, and lived the Ethiopian life almost, and I learned so much that I thought, I would never have learned this by reading the newspapers. You have to live here almost to know it. Yeah.
Okay. Before we move on to Dr. Tedros' nomination at WHO, I would like you to to comment on this African Tobacco-Free Initiative that you are now a director to.
Yeah.
What is it about, and what you guys are working at there?
Okay. Well, I've always. I was a doctor, by the way. I was a physician in the USA. I practiced medicine for 12 years, and I saw thousands of patients. And I've always been an anti-tobacco campaigner because it's, I think tobacco is really misunderstood by most people. They don't realize it's as bad as it really is. It is the biggest cause of human deaths. 1 out of 10 deaths are due to tobacco, and it's a major problem. But it's been less of a problem in Africa because, well, not in all of Africa, but in some countries, including Ethiopia, because the smoking rates have been low. But there's been a lot of tobacco control now in other countries. For example, in Britain, when I was a kid, I think it was over 50% or around 40 to 60%, I think, of adults smoked. And now it's less than 20%, even getting below 15%. So the rates have fallen because of good tobacco control initiatives and campaigners and laws against tobacco sales and taxes and all this stuff. And in Africa, it's the opposite way. Many African countries, including Ethiopia, are in the early stages of what we call the tobacco epidemic. The smoking rates are going up. And Ethiopia had the lowest smoking rate in about 7 or 8 years, even 5 or 6 years ago. And even 2 or 3 years ago, it was ranked in the bottom, I think, 5 countries as one of the lowest smoking rates in the world. But it's going up, and it's actually going up so rapidly in many African countries that it's going to be as high as if nothing is done about it. It's going to be as high as it was when I was a kid in my country, with all the consequent, disease and death associated with it. And the tobacco industry is targeting African countries, including Ethiopia, because, if you want to sell a car, you go where there are no cars, or few cars, and you sell your cars there. You're not going to go to a place where, you can't sell them. There was relatively few smokers in sub-Saharan Africa. Ethiopia, very low, but it's going up, and it's because they're targeting the developing countries and countries with low smoking rates, because that's where the business is. And unfortunately, governments are helping them do it, some of them, And so the Africa Freedom Initiative is really to get tobacco education and control across Africa, and to try and prevent this worsening tobacco epidemic, which is going to be really devastating. In fact, the WHO predicts by 2025 there's going to be only 2 regions in the world where smoking rates will go up significantly, and they are Africa and the Eastern Mediterranean region. All the other regions are going down.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Frank. Probably save the other points that you would like to make on this point as we move on to the second agenda. That's about the nomination of Dr. Tedros Adhanom for WHO Director General position. One thing that I would like to make clear to our viewers here is that it's not like campaigning against Tedros, a person.
No.
Absolutely.
This isn't about people. It's not about Ethiopia. It's not about Africa.
It's not about Ethiopia. It's not about a person. Yeah.
It's about the world's health, and the person getting the top job to run the World Health Organization for every country in the world.
Absolutely. This is a very important point that I would view.
And it is difficult, I'm sure, for many.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult for many people to get away from that. Some Ethiopians actually have criticized me for saying that I think one of the other 2 should get the job, because they think I'm disliking Ethiopia. I love Ethiopia, actually, but I'm a doctor. I took a Hippocratic oath, and I believe in giving the best person for the job. Not basing it on the fact that he's just from Ethiopia, not basing the fact that he's from Africa.
Absolutely, I'm an Ethiopian. I would have been the first. I would have been the first man to support the guy. No, for that he's from Ethiopia, also from Africa.
Yes.
But I defer because I understand that this is not about a person or a country. It's a completely different stuff we're talking about.
And
right?
I really hope that follows through with the the WHO decision. It's a little concerned that it's taking the form of a vote that's going to be not based upon the best person for the job, and it has to be. We're talking about the top job for health in the world.
Okay, so with this, I think we agree on the preface of the idea, the synthesis of the idea. Let's move on to why do you think that Dr. Tedros is not the right guy to lead WHO? Why do you think, even though he's coming relatively from a compromised background, from Africa, from Ethiopia even, the country that you said you love so much,
right? But
why do you think that he's not the right guy to lead WHO?
But he's not compromised. He's doing okay. It's the Ethiopian people
okay.
I know it's. Well, I mean, really, this isn't about Dr. Tedros. I have a lot of respect for him as what he did in the health system, some of the things he did in the health system. But I'm a foreigner. I went to Ethiopia as a professor. I'm not a politician, and I'm not involved in health. But even I was really concerned. This is one of the reasons. I was very concerned about the way the Ethiopian government supported tobacco issues and even made deals with, for example, they made a $510 million deal last year with Japan Tobacco International. Japan Tobacco International is known for its investment in developing countries. They call them emerging markets. They're very proud of it. Tobacco companies, by the way, have no ethic to make money. They don't care about people. They stop making cigarettes, and do something else. Japan Tobacco, for example, Ethiopia's, one of the markets, and they bought 40% to increase tobacco farms. That's their goal is. Deal, and was very happy about it. So there's going to be a lot of smokers potentially. Proud that this was, a big amount of money, but that money will not go to the Ethiopian people in terms of overall, because countries that spend a lot of money on cigarettes. In Africa, for example, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, they are some of the poorest countries. So investing in tobacco doesn't work. In fact, studies show that if you look at the cost of the healthcare and everything else of tobacco-related diseases, you have 3 times more cost than the actual money you put into it. So it's not to be helpful to Ethiopia's economy or anything. But that was what the Minister of Public Enterprise, but that's not correct. Studies have shown that beyond doubt. But, it concerned me that Dr. Tedros has not even mentioned this. And, I've searched for any on the web and everywhere to see if he spoke out against this deal. And he didn't. And I even contacted him myself numerous times on the internet through his WHO site, even through his Facebook site, and he never responded to me about, I said, Dr. Tedros, did you speak out? I didn't see you speak out against this terrible deal that's going to be devastating for the health of Ethiopians. There's no doubt about that. And he didn't answer, he never responded and still hasn't. I even said, what do you think about it? I asked perfectly valid questions. They weren't angry questions. They were perfectly valid scientific questions, but I didn't get an answer, and that kind of bothers me, But if I can be concerned and speak out against it, surely the minister, well, at that time was foreign minister, as someone who wants to be the WHO general secretary, general director general, should be really concerned about this in his own country, even if he is foreign minister, because he'd been the health minister, and also he wants to be the WHO director general. He has to be concerned about this terrible tobacco deal in his own country. But I also had issues before that deal. In fact, I believe I had a lot to do with getting this sorted out. There was posters from British American Tobacco, from my own country, posters advertising cigarettes. In 2013, just a year after he stopped being health minister. Basically what happened, there was lots of posters appeared up in Addis, and they were illegal in Ethiopia. The Negri Gazeta at that time showed that advertising cigarettes as posters is illegal. But I tried to figure out what was going on. I bet you there were 500 posters all over Addis advertising cigarettes in poor areas where youth could see those. And I got pretty upset by it, and I contacted British American Tobacco. They wouldn't contact. I did eventually contact the Ministry of Health, who seemed concerned about it. They were concerned about it. And I contacted my member of parliament in England to help me. I said, look, contact British American Tobacco. They're not answering me. And he got a hold of them. Otherwise, he was going to bring it up in British Parliament. And he got a hold of British American Tobacco, and they admitted that they knew about the post and told me that they were allowed to put those posters up, even though they're illegal in Ethiopia. They were allowed to put them because they got permission from the appropriate authorities. That was the quote. But the appropriate authorities must have been either National Tobacco Enterprise or the Ethiopian government. Either way, National Tobacco Enterprise is the Ethiopian government. It's owned by the Ethiopian government. So basically, the Ethiopian government was supporting an illegal advertising of posters and advertising cigarettes in their own country. And I contacted the Ministry of Health, and actually he was very nice, the man I contacted there. He wasn't the minister, but he was one of the senior people that with an MD and a public health degree. And he, within a month, all these posters came down. But what bothered me is that, again, we were seeing this illegal advertising of cigarettes, and Dr. Tedros, as far as I know, didn't even know about them. In my opinion, I don't know for sure, but he certainly, I was the one who was concerned about them, to be honest. And I mean, even the Minister of Health had not really seen these posters. I tried to tell, they were all over Addis, and I told him where to drive. Not the minister, but the man who I talked to at the minister. But, so it's kind of curious that this can happen, really. And then there was another issue where I came across an article where Dr. Tedros, as foreign minister, met with the British foreign minister, William Hague. And there's a photograph of them shaking hands, and they were supporting 30 or so businesses to encourage them to invest in Ethiopia. And one of them was British American Tobacco. And, for someone who was a health minister, he should have been concerned about that. He should really, because, tobacco is a problem, and people don't realize how big a problem it is. And it's going to be devastating for Ethiopia and Africa if something isn't done about it. So, but someone who wants to be the current Director General of the WHO, Dr. Margaret Chan, she speaks aggressively against tobacco. One of the things she really speaks out about is governments making deals with tobacco companies. How can Dr. Tedros do that speak the same words when his own government that he was a minister in, and he must have been aware of it, when he doesn't, his own country makes a huge, $510 million, that's, 10 billion birr. It's outrageously high number when you look at the poverty in Ethiopia. I would, give me $510 million dollars, and I will build hospitals in Ethiopia. I'm not going to be making my citizens smoke more cigarettes and get them addicted and produce a lot of lung cancer, heart disease, and what have you. I think it's dreadful. And this is the Director General of the WHO. He should be concerned. If I was concerned about it as far as a Ferenc, he should be really concerned about. And he talks about non-communicable diseases as being one of his big issues. He's very concerned about them, which are a problem. 80% of NCDs, we call them, occur in developing countries, and Ethiopia is going to suffer a lot of them. But smoking causes a third almost of NCDs. And plus, smoking also increases the risk of getting tuberculosis and HIV, and the risk of dying from tuberculosis and HIV. And those programs are going on there to tackle TB and HIV, and they're doing quite well. But if you increase the smoking rates, it's going to hinder those programs significantly if you start getting more people smoking, which is happening. So you can't isolate the infectious disease and whatever from the NCDs. They're all part of a big health issue, and globally, that's what's going on. The NCDs are a global problem. But when Dr. Tedros promotes NCDs as one of his big agenda, but he doesn't do anything about tobacco in his own country, which causes a third of those NCDs, it's a dilemma. It's a paradox.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Fang, so much. You made very important point that by compromise in the early part of our discussion here, what I mean was like he is disadvantaged relatively because it's difficult, like you come from countries like Ethiopia and Africa to make it to the top on the global arena. So that's exactly what I meant, quote unquote. Now, one of the points that I would like you to comment again on, one of the points that Dr. Tedros Adhanom says is that he has a very best experience that he can bring to WHO from back home while he was the health minister from 2005 to 2012.
Yeah.
This is part of the Ethiopian rising narrative, Meme, that we already said.
Well, I mean, certainly Dr. Tedros.
What experience can this guy bring to WHO?
He's had a fair amount of experience. One of my issues, and it may be a little prejudiced, is that he doesn't have a medical degree. I mean, the other two candidates have got a medical degree. One has Dr. Nishtar. She has from Pakistan. She has an MD and a PhD. And people say, oh, well, qualifications don't matter, but they do. Medical degrees are long processes. They take a lot of time. You got to do your residency, and then you may practice medicine. It's a lot of knowledge and a lot of hard work. Yeah. But
absolutely, it does matter because health politics is as much technical and professional as it is politics.
Well, global health is about many different diseases. Infectious diseases and toxic diseases and regular diseases such as NCDs, heart disease, strokes.
Absolutely.
I don't believe that someone who doesn't have a medical degree could be as efficient as someone who does. But I'm aware of that. The other two candidates have had a lot of experience as well, and they've had uninterrupted careers in global healthcare. Dr. Nishtar has done some amazing things for the health system of Pakistan. She's written a book which criticized and discussed how the Pakistan health system could be improved. She created an organization that helps poor people get healthcare that can be paid for. Kind of a charity or an organization that helps that. And she has had a lot of experience and uninterrupted, basically, in healthcare and medicine. Plus, she was a cardiologist. Dr. Nabarro, who is from my own country, and I'm not promoting him because he's British. I promote both him and Dr. Nishtar because they're, distinguished medical experience in many different areas of public health and medicine. Dr. Nabarro's had even more experience. He's older, he's had a lot of experience, and he's worked in so many different countries on nutrition and Ebola and various other health crises. Dr. Nabarro was, educated at Oxford. He was a physician in 1973. And I think Dr. Tedros might have been quite young at that time. And that's, but experience counts and qualifications count, in my opinion. They do. I think that's important. But But I think as far as the intensity of experience and the diversity, I think the other two have had more. But Dr. Tedros has had some good experiences, no doubt about that. He's a pretty accomplished man, but I don't think he meets the quality and the level of experience of the other two candidates.
Okay,
and as far as the other two candidates, I'm torn between them. I'd be happy for either of them to be Director General, but personally, I'm not, and it's nothing political, it's nothing personal. If I look at those three candidates, I'm not going for Dr. Tedros. That's my opinion for what it's worth.
Yeah, thank you. Now,
but the other issue is that, I've seen some of the oppression in Ethiopia, and Dr. Tedros is an integral part of that government. To be honest, and some of the things that I've seen, I know there's torture going on. That shouldn't be. That's one of the non-derogable rights of human beings, not to be tortured. One of the 4 non-derogable rights, and yet it's happening. And it's endorsed presumably by the government. They know it's happening, but how can you be a medical director of the WHO and not be concerned about torture? In my opinion, medicine goes beyond seeing patients. It goes into society in a big way, in many ways. And
in fact, it's part of the torture machine in that country. It's not about only this concern or all this, but he was just part of the torture machine. He was a foreign minister last year when 1,000 people were killed and many hundred thousands were being tortured. He was a foreign minister, and he was a member of what they call National Security Council, which weekly convenes and approves and give further order to this kind of killings and torture to go on.
Yeah. Well, to me, I didn't really, I wasn't paying too much attention to politics in the first couple of years, but I started to talk to people, and I heard about people telling me about, even I met people who'd been tortured. I would, for example, I sometimes would just go into Jebel Abuna cafes and have a Jebel Abuna, and some people would come up to me and chat with me. I enjoyed this, meeting a lot of different Ethiopians. But one thing I learned, and also from talking to students and other people, that torture is pretty common, and being put in jail is pretty common, just for being, expressing your political opinion. That's ridiculous. But, I learned that torture happens, and, that is a terrible thing. And if this is endorsed by the government, which it must be, then I think
it's absolutely endorsed by the government. He was sitting in the committee, for example, over the last 12 or so months, that many people were killed, 27,000 were.
Well, I can tell you my own experience.
He was sitting in the committee that were giving order and approving all this kind of havoc in the country. He was sitting in that National Security Council as a foreign minister for a few months. That they meet every week and see who has been killed and what should the next killing be. He has been part of the machine.
Yes. So but if you're medically qualified and you want to be WHO DG, Director General, you should. Torture is a problem. Torture is a problem because it harms people, and that's against the medical ethics. And if you're aware of it, you should speak out against it. And secondly, doctors are employed in torture. They're employed to, for example, monitor patients so they don't die. Let's stop. And they're also employed to give drugs to patients, to people, and they're also employed to even, sometimes they're used to devise the torture technique. And this is incredibly unethical for a doctor to do that. But, it's still, you've got to be concerned if you're going to be WHO Director General and speak out, and your words should be heard. I didn't hear any speaking out against the tobacco issues. I didn't hear any speaking about various other things, but they need to be heard by people. On the internet, everywhere, people need to say, look, Dr. Tedros should be saying, look, with the tobacco and with that, I don't agree with this. My government is doing it. I'm a member of that, but I don't agree with it. But I didn't see that. Maybe I didn't hear it, but I didn't see it. But I want to just tell you about a personal experience which was kind of surprising and shocking to me. Because at that time, I knew a lot of stuff what was going on, but I never really seen it firsthand. But one Saturday, it was a Saturday of October the 6th. You remember that last year? That was the day when there was a lot of protests around the country, and Baidao was particularly affected. Remember that? You remember that Saturday? That was a big change, I think, of things. And I saw things change in the teaching there as well, in the way things were run. I believe I did after that. That was just, I think, 3 days, I believe, before the state of emergency was declared. But there were all those protests around Ethiopia. And there was one in Addis in Stadium. And I'd been to my office, which I sometimes do on Saturday morning. And I was walking, actually, a number of kilometers to Sarbet, which is about, I guess, 6 kilometers, I guess, away. And I got not very far, and I walked into what was, I believe, the end part of a protest. It wasn't actually where the main protest was going, but I looked across the road and there was lots of soldiers dressed in riot gear and a big row of people who'd been arrested, I guess. But I think they'd been brought from the riot area there, from the protest area there. But right in front of me, I looked up and I was kind of amazed that I actually got there. I saw soldiers beating young men. They were like in their 20s. They had no weapons. They were wearing T-shirts. They were not even resisting the leather batons that they were being beaten with. And I was sort of shocked. In fact, the doctor in me told me to say something. I'm like, you're going to hurt him. You're going to break his ribs, or you're going to cause some internal injuries. And one of these, they may have been students, I'm not sure, but they were young guys. They had no weapons, no sticks. They weren't even putting their hands in the way of the batons. I couldn't believe that, and they didn't even look like they were being severely hurt, but they were, because it was severe beating. One of them fell to the ground and he continued to beat him. And then they lifted him up, put him on a truck, and continued to beat him, even though he'd been beaten to the ground. And then I realized the reality, that when you don't see it for real, it's just a thought. When you see it for real, it's shocking. I turned around and there was a soldier with a Kalashnikov, shaking his Kalashnikov and shouting at me. And I was absolutely petrified. He almost pretty much pointed the Kalashnikov on me, and he was out of control. He was really shouting and angry. And I'm like, I didn't even know how I walked into that. And I walked away from it. I was shocked. Not only was I like scared that I was going to get shot, but I'd seen the senseless and beatings there, and I didn't like that. And then I'll tell you just a little bit of extra thing. I went some ways back and I took some photographs, just 3 snapshots. And I wasn't intending to do anything with them in my mind at the time. I just wanted to get snapshots of the beatings. And about 10 minutes later, as I walked a different route, I was stopped by this van, and they pretty much told me to get on there, almost pulled me on. And then they threw me off 10 minutes later. And I thought it was a contract taxi, but I didn't want one anyway, but they pretty much almost forced me on. And then I noticed that my cell phone with photos had been taken. It was gone. And there was a cut in my jacket lining. I had no idea how they did. But I thought, is that a coincidence? That's never happened to me in 4 years. Is it a coincidence? I'm not saying the government did that, but it was a hell of a coincidence. I took those photographs, and then 10 minutes later, my phone was stolen. And by the way, there was money in my pocket, 700 birr, which is a reasonable amount of money, and it was gone. Sorry, it wasn't gone. The phone went, but the money didn't. And they even gave me my fare back. So, my feelings is that phone was stolen to take away the photographs. I've heard of people telling me, I've various friends who said some of their friends took photographs, and they got their cameras taken from them, And some of them even got, one friend told me that her boyfriend had been put in jail for 2 weeks, and they took his camera from him for taking photographs of the events. But that was my experience. I saw that firsthand, those beatings, and it's not the way to deal with citizens, especially when really they were completely doing nothing to resist. And I have to speak up. We have to speak up for the things that we don't believe are correct, and that's why I'm saying this.
That's an unfortunate reality again, Dr. Frank. Before we wind up our discussion, I would really like you to comment on a couple of points in just a couple of minutes. One is this. One of the important points that Dr. Tedros is counting on is this: the project they call Health Extension Program, where they actually deployed 35,000 health workers who were trained for 6 months. And this is one of the programs they count on. I would really like you to comment on this thing. Are these really health cadres or political cadres? This is the one important point. The other important point before that you have to comment on before we finish our show is I have seen a letter that the dean of the School of Medicine at Addis Ababa University School of Medicine, he had to write a letter to National Security Agency for you to have an exit visa.
Yeah.
Is that normal? That you can?
Yeah, it's normal.
Absolutely.
It's a very bureaucratic
with these 2 points you make in a couple of minutes.
Yeah. That is normal. It's just the basic routine bureaucracy. In fact, I had to go through, I think, 24 offices to get signatures and stamps to clear me first. This is routine, though, but it took me 3 days to do this, just so I could get that letter. But that's bureaucracy, and it's bureaucracy. It's nonsense, really. I mean, that I have to go through 24 different offices and get a signature and stamp just so I can
24 offices.
24 offices.
Amazing.
2 different campuses. This kilo, which is about 5 or 6 kilometers away, and then sometimes they weren't there, and I had to go back the next day. It took me 3 full days actually, over a period of 2 weeks, to get those signatures and stamps. And then some people actually, when you go to some of those offices, quite a few of them, the person who signs is not the person who stamps, so you can almost double that to 48. It was sort of amusing. The people were very nice, by the way. It wasn't their fault, it's the bureaucracy. But then I had to get that just so I could get my clearance letter.
That's fine. That's fine. Let you comment on this health extension project that the Ethiopian government, they received a number of international awards for that project. They deployed 35,000 plus female, all of them female workers. To the rural area.
Most of them, Yeah, it's a very good system. There's no question it's a good system, but it doesn't solve healthcare beyond the initial area, because once you get into the higher clinics, if you get referred, you have to pay, right? It's not free, but it is at the health extension work. I mean, there's a lot of preventive medicine stuff going on, vaccines or whatever, education about sanitation. But one of the things that I have never seen anything on the web about this, and maybe I haven't searched properly, but I haven't found anything. But I spoke to a lot of people, including some people are health extension workers themselves. And, I found out that it's pretty common knowledge that they're not, and it is a wonderful thing, and Dr. Tedros can be congratulated for being involved in that. But, I heard, everybody told me this, it was like common knowledge. It really surprised me that these mainly females, as you said, who are picked out of high school, I think 15, 16 years old, and they're trained for a year in healthcare to go into their little villages and do the job there, which is very nice. But I also heard from everybody pretty much I talked to, including, as I said, 2 health extension workers, one of whom stopped being one because she had to walk 7 kilometers there and back to work every day. But they told me that they are also training these healthcare extension workers in party politics to be, support the ruling party. And I think that's unethical when you combine healthcare with party politics. And I also heard that even some of them are allocating in their villages, they're allocating other people to be informers and to look out for anybody who might not like the government. And that's a concern. We're using, a political ideology using health extension workers on a healthcare issue to push a political agenda. That's unethical in my opinion. I think this should be about healthcare, not about politics and healthcare. But it seems to me, I don't know whether it was done from the beginning or whether it happened, but I was told they're being trained in party politics and they're trained to spy on people and also to allocate new informants. My general knowledge has been, and from what I've heard and read, is that if you don't support the ruling party, you can be punished. You may not get a good job, or you may not get even access to some food aid, or you might not get even healthcare, I've heard. And I have no verification of that, but it's something I've heard. In the university, there are definitely student spies. It's very uncomfortable, to teach a class when you've got this thought in your mind that some of them might be spying on you and what you might say. University is about academic freedom. And you should be able to talk about things. I never incited any violence to students. That's not the way to do it. You couldn't even, you were afraid sometimes what you're going to say. And you've got this idea that some of these students might be government spies. And, I've heard from many students that students are paid extra cash to be informers, and it tempts them to be informers. That's not a good situation in a university. Universities are organizations of discussion and intellectual, merit, not politically ideological places to be controlled by.
Indeed. Thank you, Dr. Frank Ashall, for coming in. And with this, we end our show. Thank you for watching Addis Rabadori program. For me and our digital producer, Farhan Abdul Salam, thank you for watching and goodbye.
Thank you very much.